The path of cultivating immortals is obstructed and long. Fu Yu thought she had already experienced the hardships, but every time it proved that she was just getting ready. Starting from humble, trapped in ordinary. The little woman struggling in the ups and downs gradually grew into a legendary fairy. This is a story of an ugly duckling turning into a swan. P.S. No male lead, female strong cultivator upgrade article. Welcome to Add QQ Book Friend Group. 606160690 Keywords of the novel. Qingyun Female Immortal Record with no pop-ups. Download the complete set of Qingyun Female Immortal Record TXT, and read the latest chapters of Qingyun Female Immortal Record. Chapter 1. Immortal Sect in Xianshan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Immortal Sect in Xianshan. The clear water flows westward, and the peach forest stretches thousands of miles. Ah! The exclamation suddenly sounded, and the birds on the peach tree flapped their wings and flew around the tree. It seemed that there was no sense of danger, so it slowly fell back to the treetop. At this moment, there was a spaceship in the sky above the peach forest, prominently marked with the emblem of the Cloud and Mist Sect, indicating that the disciple had returned. The forest-guarding disciple straightened up against the gatepost when he saw the spaceship appear. The disciple in charge of the ship felt relieved as he looked at the towering mountains ahead from afar. He turned back to the child, who lowered his head and said silently, "You are naturally surprised to see such a peach forest for the first time. This 1,000-mile green peach forest is unique to our Cloud and Mist Sect." There is a strong sense of pride in the tone. Along the way, apart from necessary daily communication, neither of the two immortals spoke much, and there were even fewer moments when their emotions were exposed. At this moment, I heard a fairy initiate the mention of the Cloud and Mist Sect, and all the other children looked up, their eyes wide open, at the fairy speaking. It is obvious that I hope the other party can say more about the Cloud and Mist Sect, which is the sect they are about to enter. Sigh. The disciple saw the longing of these children on his face, but his heart was filled with confusion, and he suddenly lost interest in continuing to speak. All of them are ordinary children from remote mountain villages. Although they are fortunate to have spiritual roots, they are all pseudo-spiritual roots. Such qualifications naturally cannot become formal disciples of the sect, and can only start as miscellaneous workers. And among these children, the oldest is only 10 years old, while the youngest is 6 years old. They are helpless and have little talent in this cultivation world. Although they have spiritual roots, they do not know whether it is fortunate or unfortunate. Seeing their hopeful gazes, he couldn't help but think of how similar his experiences were back then. However, he can undoubtedly be considered lucky. He successfully entered the outer gate and became an official disciple of the sect, because out of the 6 of them back then, he was the only one who saved his life. The path of cultivating immortality was arduous step by step. The spaceship entered the mountains and peaks, and the peach forest behind was gradually thrown behind by the spaceship. At this moment, the ship-controlled disciple suddenly realized that he had lost his composure and couldn't help but secretly marvel at the enchantment of the peach blossom. As expected, his cultivation during the foundation building period almost lost his mind. Thinking of this, he glanced vaguely at the old man who had been sitting in a closed position, and combined with the other person's behavior along the way, he secretly blamed himself, warning himself not to be careless at all on the path of cultivating immortality, to be cautious in words and actions, in order to live a long life. Stop! The man in charge of the ship was taken aback and looked at the old man, who had already opened his eyes in confusion, saying, "Gu Lao." Although the old man is also a foundational cultivator, he has already reached the later stage and has some reputation among the disciples of the outer sect. Everyone also respectfully calls him Gu Lao. The man in charge of the ship had only recently built the foundation and had just entered the outer door. Although he was puzzled in his heart, he still used the magic technique in his hand to control the spaceship to slow down and slowly come to a stop. After all, there are still these children on the ship, and if they suddenly stop the spaceship, they may not be able to withstand it. The old man nodded imperceptibly at the man's movements, then stopped speaking, but turned his gaze behind him. The man looked inexplicably, only to realize that a bird was flying towards them in the distance at an extremely fast speed. Within a few breaths, it gradually became clear. This speed was not an ordinary bird, but a large blue bird he had never seen before, with a fiery red crown on its forehead and a green flame surrounding it. Ha 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 ha. Qinglan, hurry up. The man suddenly widened his eyes. This, isn't he dizzy? There is still a child on the flying bird, right? Just didn't wait for him to see clearly. A gust of strong wind blew before his eyes, and as he squinted, the big bird had already gone far away. There was no sound of childish laughter. Let's go. The old man was also stunned by the rare sight of the flying bird that had gone far away. With just a breath, he replied to the face of Gu Jingwubua. The man in charge of the ship did not notice the old man's abnormality, only looked at him and couldn't help but ask, Gu, did you hear the laughter of a child just now? Gu nodded and gestured for the man to continue driving the spaceship into the mountain gate before continuing, you heard me right, that's the Blue Phoenix. Speaking of this, I stopped talking and immediately closed my eyes to meditate. Qingfeng. The man couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, and immediately realized that he had made a mistake. He calmed his mind and finally restrained his words, focusing on driving the spaceship. Only in the heart, but with surging thoughts. He has never seen the Qingfeng, but he has heard of it. Any cloud and mist sect, no, it should be said that no one in the floating light continent is unaware of the Qingfeng, not only because it has the bloodline of the ancient divine beast Huifeng, but also because its owner is the elder of their cloud and mist sect. Mu Qingzhou. Thinking of the name Mu Qingzhou, the man's heart was filled with infinite emotion. At the age of 52, he had a pill, and at 180, he had a baby, breaking the record of having a baby at the age of 223, which was one of the four great masters and the former chief disciple of the Tianqi sect. Now, at the age of 500, he is already a great cultivator of transforming gods, ranking among the elders of the Cloud and Mist sect. Undoubtedly, he is a legendary figure of the Cloud and Mist sect, and even the entire floating light continent. From this perspective, it is not difficult to guess the identity of the young child. Who else could ride the Qingfeng as a mount? It must be the young daughter of the sect leader. Mu Qingyun, who is only 5 years old, is undoubtedly the younger sister of Elder Mu. Only with such identity and background can one live so recklessly. Gu Laogang just wanted to make way for himself, so it's understandable. It's rumored that Mu Qingzhou is very protective of his younger sister, who is several hundred years younger than him. The whole family has long regarded Mu Qingyun, who is only 5 years old, as the number one person who cannot be offended. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Between Sisters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Between Sisters, Sister. Mu Qingyun, who is known as the number one in the sect and cannot be offended, was now full of frustration. Sister. The wings of the Qingfeng bird lifted, and Mu Qingyun was gently placed on the ground by it. Mu Qingyun gently stroked the feathers of the phoenix, took out a small jade bottle from his small cloth bag, poured out a baiwei dan, and fed it to the green phoenix. Then he called out his sister and ran towards the cave ahead. Sister. Running to the entrance of the cave, Mu Qingyun suddenly stopped. She remembered her mother's warning that her sister's cave should not be noisy at will, as it would disturb her sister's cultivation. Thinking of this, she was worried that her voice just now would disturb her sister, and her heart was even more depressed. She felt like she couldn't do anything well and always did the wrong thing. Suddenly, she felt someone touching her head and looked up, feeling a sudden surge of joy in her heart. Sister. What's wrong with Yuner? Why are you unhappy? A woman from the cave walked out who looked only 10 years old, with apricot eyes and cherry lips, long hair naturally hanging down to her waist, wide-sleeved white skirt, black hair and white skirt dancing together in the wind. Mu Qingyun shook her head in frustration and looked at her fairy-like beautiful sister in front of her. She asked nervously, "Sister, did I disturb you just now?" My mother said. No. Mu Qingzhou stopped his sister's words and took her hand as she walked into the cave, comforting her. Mother was just worried that you would come out alone, which scared you. You came here, and my sister didn't have time to be happy. How could you be disturbed? Upon hearing her sister say that she was very happy to see her, Mu Qingyun felt very happy in her heart. She then chattered about her recent troubles and said, "My mother told me that I have water and wood double spiritual roots, and she wants me to practice more water spiritual roots to avoid delaying my cultivation speed due to the double spiritual roots." Speaking of which, her mood fell again, blaming her poor aptitude. It would be great if she could have a single water attribute spiritual root like her sister. Mu Qingzhou's footsteps suddenly stopped, and he couldn't help but tighten his grip on his sister's hand. Sister. Mu Qingzhou suddenly lowered his head to look at his sister and whispered in confusion, "What's wrong, Yuner?" The voice was almost murmuring. Pain. Mu Qingyun's eyebrows involuntarily furrowed due to the pain. Seeing his sister's distracted expression, he called out with concern, "Sister." Oh. Mu Qingzhou regained his senses and realized that his actions had hurt his sister. "It's all my fault, sister. I accidentally hurt you, but sister really didn't mean to." As he spoke, he lifted Mu Qingyun's small hand, and the red fingerprints on the back of the hand were particularly glaring in contrast to his fair and tender skin. Mu Qingzhou stroked the red mark with his fingertips, and the threads of water wrapped around his little hand, gradually forming a white mist. In one breath, the white mist dissipated and the red mark disappeared. Mu Qingyun blinked his eyes and looked at his sister, full of admiration, saying, "Sister is so amazing." She thought to herself that her mother had to work hard to cultivate water spiritual power, and there was indeed a reason. It turns out that water spiritual power is so magical. She secretly made up her mind not to be lazy or think of sneaking out to play in the future. She must listen to her mother, work hard to cultivate, and be as powerful as her sister. Mu Qingzhou lowered his head and looked at the little girl with her head held high, her eyes shining brightly. He looked at himself with admiration on his face and smiled slightly. "Do Yuner envy her?" Mu Qingyun kicked the small stone on the ground with his toes and nodded naturally, "Of course I envy you. Just like my mother said about my sister's exceptional talent, she is the youngest spiritual cultivator in the entire continent and the pride of the sect. What do you think?" Mu Qingzhou lightly smiled and touched the little girl's head, her eyes unusually absent-minded. She had asked the person about this question before, and how he answered it at that time. "Me, of course it is." Mu Qingyun saw his sister looking at him unusually seriously, her eyes rolled, and she swallowed the words back to her mouth. She stuck out her tongue and continued, "I won't tell you." As he spoke, he was about to let go of Mu Qingzhou's hand and run forward, only to find that his hand was firmly held. "Do I have to tell you?" Mu Qingzhou's expression was serious and stubborn. Mu Qingyun had never seen such an expression on her sister's face before. Although her hand was a bit painful, she was very happy in her heart. Her sister really cared about her opinion of her. She pursed her lips slightly shyly, shook her sister's hand, and mustered the courage to say, "You are the most powerful, beautiful, and my favorite sister in the world." A childish voice echoed in the cave, and two figures, one big and one small, gradually disappeared into the depths of the cave. Open a pit, everyone support us a lot. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. A Woman Named Jade, 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. A Woman Named Jade, 1. At this moment, Mu Qingyun didn't know that there was such a person, far away in the northern region, yet feeling her joys and sorrows. Bayou Tianqi is a small neighborhood city located east of the 5th level Sect gate within the Sect's territory. When Fu Yu opened his eyes again, he was stunned and lost in thought. Sister. She rubbed the center of her eyebrows. Who exactly is it? I miss her being alone for decades, carefree, and I can't understand. In these past few months, figures have appeared intermittently in my dreams, which are so unfamiliar. However, I can feel the other person's emotions, and it's becoming clearer and clearer. This time, I can vaguely hear one or two words. Grandpa said he picked me up. Do I still have a younger sister? Fu Yu touched his chin and pondered the possibility. Oh, no, I'm not building a foundation, am I? Fu Yu patted his head and nervously felt it, but it was indeed a failure. Alas, it is difficult to build a foundation for the 4 spirit roots. Without the assistance of high-level foundation building pills, it may be hopeless. Thinking of the spiritual stone needed to purchase the high-level foundation pill, Fu Yu's heart trembled and he let out a heavy sigh. Just as he was about to get up from the ground, he saw a paper crane enter the cave. Fu Yu reached out and the cardboard box naturally landed in his palm, followed by a soft and beautiful female voice. Dao Yu, tomorrow at Dongsher Liangting and Shirley Market for election, if interested, you can come and participate. As soon as the female voice fell, the paper crane ignited and turned into ashes. Fu Yu's movements slowed down for a while, and his hand was covered in paper dust. Humph, it's indeed the style of a 10-mile market. Even with such an unremarkable messenger paper crane, it's not afraid of being blown away by a gust of wind. She muttered to herself, pondered, and ultimately decided to make this trip. It is said that these 10-mile markets are not really markets, but organizations that recruit domestic workers for Dongsher. As the streets of Dongsher are 10 miles long, this organization is called the 10-mile market. As a casual cultivator, working as a servant is one of Fu Yu's sources of income. She had visited the 10-mile market before and would earn 10 inferior spiritual stones in a day. However, considering the spiritual stones needed to purchase high-level building foundation pills, and with no other good options available, she decided to try her luck and see if there were any short-term workers with higher commission fees. Little master, Fu Yu took out 2 spirit beads from the storage bag and placed them on the small table. He said to the boy who was collecting the customer's spirit beads, I want 2 steamed buns filled with fatesai. The little boy quickly collected the spirit beads, took out 2 fatesai bags from the steamer, wrapped them in paper, and handed them to Fu Yudao. Where did the fairy sister go this morning? Fu Yu rolled her eyes in her heart, feeling that the children now are about to become sperm. Taking the steamed bun handed over by the little boy, she couldn't help but say, just sell your bun honestly and don't worry about so much. Without waiting for the boy to answer, he left on his own. This boy is the long-term servant of this 10-mile market. Although he has not yet brought his breath into his body and his body is mortal, he is superior to others in arousing his spirit, which is why he came up with this plan to sell spiritual bags. Last time, Fu Yu set up a booth with him for 2 days. Thanks to Fu Yu's successful cultivation in refining qi, this boy also earned a lot. It is precisely because of this that the conversation we had earlier came to fruition. Fu Yu ate while walking, and when she arrived at the pavilion, she saw that there were already many people inside, about 30 or 40 people. With so many people participating in the fundraising, I don't know how many people are needed for this 10-mile market. Fu Yu looked at the groups of people in groups of 3 or 2 and found that everyone's cultivation was generally in the qi refining period. She couldn't see through the cultivation of 2 of them, which means that the other person's cultivation was at least in the foundation building period. However, Fu Yu, the tall and thin middle-aged man, knew that his cultivation in the middle of building a foundation was named Yan Shi, while the other one was unfamiliar to the eye. Most of the participants in the recruitment process are qi cultivators, while there are very few foundation building cultivators. It seems that this fundraising may have a challenging task. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Jade with a female name, 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Jade with a female name, too. Fu Yu looked at the two foundation building cultivators, but did not know that someone was also looking at her. Many people had already received news before they arrived that the Shirley market had discovered the lair of the second-level spirit beast, the Howling Sirius. This time, the main purpose was to recruit a small team of people to go hunting wolves. Because it was likely a team task, Fu Yui appeared, and the high-level Qi refining cultivators who received internal information also secretly scrutinized Fu Yui. Seeing Fu Yu's delicate appearance, looking around 20 or 30 years old, with a perfect cultivation of Qi, dressed in a gray Taoist robe, hair tied up with a wooden hairpin, and dressed simply and neatly, they all nodded in their hearts. Those who practice Taoism are most afraid of those weak women who drag their feet. After waiting for about a stick of incense, the organizers of this fundraising, the people from the 10-mile market, arrived at the pavilion. It's an unfamiliar face, and this fundraising is indeed not easy. Fu Yu stood up in an orderly manner like everyone else, looking at the mysterious cultivator in front of her. She couldn't help but regret her trip. With her understanding of the 10-mile market, if she can scratch your bones, she won't leave a layer of skin for you. Even ordinary spirit stones are fine. This formation may just attract cannon fodder, but there is no way back. She is risking her life. Dear fellow Taoists, Xianfeng Taoist swept over the cultivators in front of him and paused on the two men during the foundation construction period. He nodded inwardly and announced that the message from the second-level Howling Wolf was indeed correct. Xianfeng from the next 10-li market. As soon as the Xianfeng Taoist's voice fell, someone took a deep breath. The person in front of me is actually a Ningdan Taoist. The 10-mile market attaches great importance to this mission. Humph. It's really a big move, even the Ningdan cultivator used it. It seems that the plan is quite impressive. Fu Yuxia let go of her thoughts and used her cultivation to want to leave from under the watchful eye of the Ningdan cultivator, without realizing it. However, there could only be one outcome. To become a cannon fodder that was killed as a warning to the monkeys. Xianfeng Taoist looked at the expressions of everyone and couldn't help but correct his body. He coughed lightly and then said, since all the Taoist friends have come here, I think they have gained some understanding of this mission and have already made plans. Upon hearing this, Fu Yu thought to herself that something was amiss. What does this Xianfeng Taoist mean? If she didn't understand correctly, could she understand it as? Since you have all come, there is no way out. The original plan for hunting the second-level Howling Wolf was to recruit a team of 20 people, led by me, to completely annihilate the Howling Wolf hideout. I have some last-minute matters to attend to, so I personally plan to recruit an additional team of nearly 20 people, led by the foundation building period cultivators arranged by us. As soon as Xianfeng Taoist finished speaking, a cultivator opened his mouth to speak, but was blocked by Xianfeng Taoist. The second-level Howling Sirius is equivalent to our cultivation during the foundation period, which is naturally not a problem for all Taoist friends. As he spoke, his tone changed and his face became serious. However, as you all know, howling wolves live in groups, and we cannot yet determine the size of the wolf pack. Therefore, this mission cannot be too cautious. Upon hearing what Xianfeng Taoist said, many people nodded slightly. That's true. Although it's just a second-order spirit beast, the lone wolf and wolf pack are vastly different. Master Xianfeng, since the danger of this mission is not small, I don't know what I got. Everyone looked for a voice, which came from the left front of the team. It's him. Yan Shi. Fu Yu's heart twitched as his gaze casually swept over the man standing on her slanted side, whose cultivation was impenetrable. I don't know what he's thinking at this moment. Although Fu Yu felt that this mission would not be as simple as Xianfeng Taoist said, he couldn't find any obvious loopholes in Xuanfeng's words, and couldn't help but speculate whether other cultivators knew something. During his contemplation, Fu Yu was startled to see the man turning his head towards her. He quickly shifted his gaze to Yan Shi. What a high level of vigilance. Fu Yu quickly restrained his mind and dared not look around casually anymore. Two flowers bloom, each representing one branch. Within the southern cloud and mist sect. On the mountaintop, by the Yunwu River. In the dim dawn light, a small figure sat still and motionless, constantly shrouded in white mist. The figure appeared faintly, making people feel that the sitting figure was just an illusory shadow. "Hey, you probably haven't fallen asleep." A boy's voice suddenly rang out in Mu Qingyun's mind, her eyelashes trembling slightly, but she still sat still without any intention of answering the other person. "Oh, really fell asleep?" The boy's voice rang out again, this time more like muttering to himself. "I was just asleep, I didn't admit it last time." Mu Qingyun stood up with a jerk, unable to control his body due to his fast movements. His small body stumbled and almost tripped over his own foot. Ha ha ha! A burst of laughter exploded in Mu Qingyun's mind. Laughing at the fish. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Koi in the Water. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Koi in the Water. Mu Qingyun calmed down, her face flushed, and she trembled as she pointed to the jumping fish, her mouth open and closed, but she couldn't speak. In the end, her body suddenly squatted down, her hands clasped around her knees, and she began to cry loudly. The boy's voice paused, completely unaware that Mu Qingyun would have such a reaction. He thought the little girl's angry stomping of her feet was quite cute, so he would tease her from time to time. He couldn't help but tease her. Seeing Mu Qingyun holding her body in a small ball, she felt an unbearable feeling in her heart and was immediately anxious to jump back and forth in the water. "Hey, don't cry," the boy was really anxious now. With such a crying technique, the little girl shouldn't have cried out of breath. Isn't there no one to accompany him in the future? Suddenly, he had a sudden idea and said, "I haven't heard any great cultivator loves to cry so much." Mu Qingyun's body stiffened, and her crying slowly subsided. However, within a few breaths, she stopped crying. She took out a handkerchief and wiped her face before lifting her head and glaring fiercely at the little carp that jumped out of the water. "Who said I love to cry? Who did you see crying?" At this point, she stared at the carp that had already sunk into the water without blinking, and swore, "I will definitely be very powerful." But there was a grievance on her face that she had not even noticed. Seeing her pitiful appearance, the little carp softened and comforted, "You're working so hard, you'll definitely be very strong in the future." Although your qualifications are not very good, the little carp sighed inwardly. He had been consciously swimming in this stream since the beginning, and few people came here. Day after day, he couldn't remember how many years he had been swimming in this water. This stream meanders down and should lead directly to the lake below the peak, but he has a sense that he is not yet ready to leave this stream. He vaguely felt something very important attracting him, but he couldn't say exactly what it was. Coupled with his fear of the unknown world, he stayed here for a long time. Until 3 months ago, this little girl from the human race came here. To his surprise, the little girl could hear his voice. You should know that he hasn't tried to communicate with people for so many years. I don't remember many years ago, an old man was muttering to himself by the stream, saying that there was some treasure. He thought of the inexplicable feeling in his heart and became anxious, so he made a sound, but the person couldn't hear his voice at all. Afterwards, he realized that the human race could not hear his own voice, or perhaps could not understand it at all. At that time, he felt lonely, but at the same time, he also breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Of course, little carp wouldn't tell Mu Qingyun about these things. She just made her swear not to reveal anything about their relationship, indicating that it was a promise between good friends. Mu Qingyun didn't know that only he could hear the voice of the little carp. Although she doesn't usually pay much attention to the appearance of the little carp, in her heart, she treats the little carp as a good friend. Since the little carp doesn't want her to tell others about him, she just doesn't say anything. Although not telling her sister made her feel uneasy for a while, she had never asked little carp before, and she breathed a sigh of relief in her heart, while also feeling a sense of secret joy. Little carp, do you think I'm useless? Mu Qingyun's face showed a rare sadness of her age. My mother said that the new disciples in the sect have already infused qi into their bodies, but I can't even feel the water's spiritual power. Didn't you already introduce air into your body? The little carp is puzzled. Didn't I come over last month and tell him that I had already infused qi into my body? Why can't I even feel spiritual power now? That's different. Mu Qingyun hesitated as she shook her head and said, how can the wood spirit root attract qi into the body like the water spirit root? It's different. The little carp jumped out of the water and shot a small water column in the direction of Mu Qingyun, but the force was not enough. Before it reached the shore, the water column scattered and fell into the stream. He wagged his tail in the air and then fell back into the stream, saying nonchalantly, your human race is complex. If you introduce qi into your body, it's not enough. What attributes do you care about? It's really troublesome. If you don't have anything to do, you can cause trouble. It's not like that, only the water attribute is the most powerful. How can the wood spirit root attract qi into the body compared to the water spirit root? Mu Qingyun shook her head, thinking that she had been practicing water spiritual power for such a long time, but had not made any progress at all. The wood attribute spiritual root, which she ignored, naturally led her qi into her body, and she felt even more convinced that her mother's statement was correct. Sure enough, the water attribute is the best, otherwise it wouldn't be so difficult. It's just that my qualifications are not good. I heard that my sister completed the process of introducing qi into her body in half a month, while I have been practicing for half a year now, but there is no sign of improvement. Thinking of this made her feel even more uncomfortable, feeling that she had lost face with her parents and let down her sister's expectations. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Hidden Worries. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Hidden Worries. Although little carp has lived for countless years, he has always been ignorant about cultivation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to spray a jet of water far away, let alone the cultivation of the human race. So he didn't dare to take the liberty of speaking, and he also thought that water attribute spiritual power might be the best, otherwise how could he feel so comfortable in the water? However, he still used his own words to explain Mu Qingyun as usual. I hear from you that your sister is a rare genius. Since she is a genius, it is certain that she practices faster than others. As for the others, it is because they do not cultivate water spiritual power. If they cultivate water spiritual power, they will definitely not be as fast as you in introducing qi into the body. Upon hearing the little carp say this, Mu Qingyun's eyes lit up. Yeah. Of course, I am not as powerful as my sister, and I am not as fast as others because I am practicing the most difficult water spiritual power. Although the new disciples in the sect practice quickly, they will definitely not be as powerful as me in the future. Mu Qingyun became more and more excited as she thought about it. She excitedly waved her little fist and wanted to tell her mother the good news. Little carp, thank you. I'll come see you again tomorrow. Mu Qingyun waved his hand at the small carp in the water and ran happily down the peak. The little carp jumped out of the water and looked at Mu Qingyun's small figure, feeling a bit worried. He couldn't explain where this worry came from. He had to impatiently wave his tail, fall back into the water, and finally disappear under the stream, repeating his exploration in the water. At this moment, a group of cultivators were slowly moving forward on the outskirts of the demon domain forest. Occasionally, one or two low-level spirit beasts appear and are instantly killed by the cultivators among them. After all, the lowest among these people also have cultivation in the middle stage of qi refining. Why be so cautious? A cultivator swung out his spiritual power, and the spirit rabbit, who was running away in a hurry, was hit in both legs by the spiritual power. The cultivator chuckled lightly and picked up the spirit rabbit from the ground, feeling somewhat dissatisfied. There are only some inexperienced little spirit beasts around here, so what should we be afraid of? It's time to accelerate forward. If you can't wait, you can leave first, which will also help us explore the way. The complaining cultivator didn't expect the foundation building cultivator at the 10-mile market to take his words, and he didn't leave a face for him. His face was also not good looking. Thanks to his cultivation in the middle stage of foundation construction, Xianshan was also a well-known figure in the entire Dongsha city. I didn't expect that the cultivators in this 10-mile market would dare to be so arrogant in the early stage of foundation construction. Although Xianshan was not angry in his heart, this place was already close to the forest enclosure. Considering the benefits promised by the Tenli market, he had to suppress his anger and not take the words of the foundation building cultivator. Others dare not go against the wishes of the two leader cultivators when they see Xianshan, who has the highest cultivation level, so they naturally dare not have any other opinions. So, without encountering any large spiritual beasts along the way, the group of over 30 people walked quietly and orderly all the way to the inner circle. As soon as they entered the inner circle, the atmosphere among the people became noticeably different, and their expressions became solemn. Everyone knows that there is a strange phenomenon in this demon realm forest. All advanced spirit beasts rarely appear on the periphery. It is precisely because of this phenomenon that no one can understand that even the brave ordinary people outside the demon domain forest dare to venture into it. On the other hand, while there is no danger to the cultivators on this periphery, it cannot provide them with opportunities. Even some spiritual materials from earlier times cannot withstand being picked by others, like entering an uninhabited realm. The monks were surprised by the occurrence of this situation, and of course, they had investigated the cause, but none of them found anything. The last widely accepted statement among cultivators is that the advanced spirit beasts in the demon forest do not want to actively oppose cultivators, which is why the demon forest is left empty as a transitional zone between spirit beasts and human cultivators. It is precisely because of this viewpoint that cultivators will not enter the inner circle casually. Even if they have to come to the inner circle to seek opportunities, few cultivators are alone, and everyone will choose to explore in groups. Fu Yu tightened his long sword in his hand. This sword was a high-level spiritual weapon that she had spent all her possessions on before coming. It was a first-level medium-grade sword, although it could not match the peak spiritual sword she had before, it was better than nothing. Besides, she has also figured it out. With her qualifications, relying on the same accumulation as before, she will never be able to build a foundation for her whole life. Although this opportunity is full of crises, it may also be her Fu Yu's opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the map, we still have a few days' journey from the stronghold of the Howling Wolf. The leader of the foundation building cultivator collected the map in his hand, looked at the dense jungle nearby, and his expression became solemn. I believe everyone knows the rumors about the demon domain forest, so I won't say much. Everyone should also know how to act. At this point, he paused and looked at the cultivator beside him. The cultivator nodded slightly as he saw that everyone had completely lost their freedom on the periphery, and then continued, "Our only purpose this time is the lair of the Howling Wolf. If anyone causes trouble on the way and troubles everyone, don't blame my subordinates for being merciless." Everyone looked solemn upon hearing these words. They also saw that among the two team leaders, the old man was probably stronger. Besides, the old man's words were reasonable, and everyone nodded in agreement. Fu Yu also nodded in agreement with everyone. This is not just a show, the old man's words are exactly what she is worried about. She has never been to this inner circle before. It is indeed a combination of danger and opportunity. If someone recklessly intrudes and causes unnecessary trouble, she will inevitably suffer as well. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Demon Realm Scare. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Demon Realm Scare on the third day. As they continued to deepen, the demon domain forest also became even darker and deeper. On this day, it was Fu Yu's turn to be on duty at night, and together with her were 4 men in the Qi refining period, one of whom, like her, had the pinnacle of Qi refining cultivation. 5 people centered around the entire team, guarding each other in 5 directions, but no one spoke or even made eye contact. They only looked around with a serious expression. Not every one of them has a reserved nature, but these days, it is a significant burden for them who are highly mentally tense. It is better to close their eyes and maintain physical strength when they have time to chat. After all, in such an environment, an extra bit of strength is crucial when there is a chance of survival. Suddenly, Fu Yu opened his eyes. She was not sure if she was feeling dizzy, as it was midnight, but she suddenly saw a strange beast rushing towards them not far away. The reason why it is called a strange beast is because in Fu Yu's eyes, the strange beast has a head like a cow, a body like a bird, and moves on both legs at an extremely fast speed. Ah! Suddenly, a scene appeared in front of Fu Yushi, who was quite frightened and couldn't help but scream out in surprise. Everyone was already tired and tense, and Fu Yu's screams were sudden and panicked, which startled everyone. The most responsive one was actually Xianshan during the foundation construction period. His body rubbed and jumped up like a released spring, and such a strong reaction attracted everyone's attention just as they cast their gaze at Fu Yu. People around Xianshan noticed that even under the night light, the shame and anger on his face were obvious. "What do you mean?" Fu Yu did not respond to Xianshan's questioning. Under this low pressure, everyone couldn't help but hold their breath. "Alright, now is the time to work together, we still have to hurry tomorrow." The old leader impatiently stopped the farce. Xianshan's footsteps stopped, his clenched fists bulging with veins. Seeing the old man still staring at him, he grinned. "Wait and see." Then he sat back on the ground with great grace. The good person felt a bit regretful when they didn't make a scene, but Tay, the nun, was probably already scared out of her wits. However, Fu Yu seemed to have completely ignored everyone's reproachful or gloating gaze. She shook her head, her eyes wide open, as if she wanted to stare a hole in the darkness in front of her. Fu Yu was not sure if he had hallucinations just now, because the scene only appeared for a moment before disappearing again. Seeing her restless expression, the old leader frowned. The female cultivator is really useless. Not only the elderly, but also others believe that Fu Yu has been mentally tense and has lost consciousness in recent days. Only a man looked at Fu Yu thoughtfully, then looked in the direction of Fu Yu's gaze. His eyebrows furrowed slightly, and suddenly, his eyebrows moved, and his body had already swept away a few dozen steps. Ah! Bang! In the darkness, the vibrations of the ground, the screams of monks, and the collision of objects were almost simultaneously heard. Fu Yu's body reflexively retreated backwards, but suddenly stumbled. She steadied herself and hurriedly swept through the dim moonlight, becoming a cultivator with a deformed head. She suddenly looked up, but only saw the back of a strange beast running rapidly, with 2 huge cow horns standing on top of her head. Fu Yu turned stiffly, and within his visual range, he was filled with a burst of starlight. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Escape for Life. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Escape for Life. Fu Yu felt like a flower in front of her, with a momentary blindness. There was no starlight in the next moment, just like an illusion that appeared in an instant. But at this moment, the panicked crowd and the blood and flesh blurred corpses on the ground made her realize soberly that what had just appeared was not an illusion, definitely not, just like the distant monster. Fu Yu's heart skipped a beat. It seemed that the bull-headed monster was not coming towards them, but rather seemed to be yes. It's like running for life. And they just blocked their way. Fu Yu thought of that moment of starlight, her heart beating like a drum, and her body suddenly rushed out towards the side. The cultivators have obviously not regained their senses from the previous incident, except for one person. After this sudden incident, Xianshan kept a close eye on Fu Yu. Seeing that Fu Yu's expression had changed greatly, he seemed to be leaving alone without saying a word. He didn't have time to think much, so his body swept away and he followed closely behind. In just a few breaths, he saw the figure of the woman quickly shuttling through the forest not far from him. Xianshan exerted his strength and was about to catch up and ask a question when he heard faint cries of sorrow coming from behind. His body suddenly froze, and a flying sword suddenly appeared in front of him, ignoring everything else. The flying sword suddenly grew larger, about 2 zhang long and 1 zhang wide, before stopping. The man leaped and stood on the flying sword, silently reciting the mnemonic. The flying sword flew forward like a gust of wind, and in the next moment, it caught up with Fu Yu in front. Fu Yu naturally heard the mournful cries from behind and didn't care about what happened behind, only accelerating his pace. As she was running for her life in a hurry, her collar tightened and she felt like she was being grabbed and flew into the air. Fu Yu lowered her head and saw a flying sword under her feet. "Stand firm." Suddenly, a man's voice came to my ears, which was a bit deep. Fu Yu looked at the man in surprise, then breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. It's important to escape first. Listening to the already faint and inaudible howl, she looked back with lingering fear and saw an endless forest, dim and deep, with no trace of light. Fu Yu's heart stabilized a bit now, and he couldn't help but recall what the light in that area was. When he thought of that strange beast, he felt that the jungle was like a fierce beast with a big mouth open, hiding murderous intent everywhere. Thinking of the last time I came alone to break through this inner circle, I couldn't help but marvel at my good luck. I only damaged a spirit sword and didn't lose my life here. In the end, the flying sword came to a stop on a relatively open grassy slope. At the signal of Xianshan, Fu Yu reluctantly jumped off the flying sword. "Taoist friend." "No, this Taoist." Fu Yu was really a bit scared. This man probably didn't plan to leave her halfway. After last night, she didn't feel like she could safely go out alone. Following this man had a glimmer of hope. After all, those who could fly with swords were at least in the early stages of condensing pills. This man is exactly the person who, like Yan Shi before, made her unable to see through his cultivation, and unexpectedly hid so deeply. Xianshan looked at Fu Yu with a slightly nervous expression and smiled slightly. "You can talk about last night, Taoist friend," he said. Fu Yu was taken aback for a moment, and then swallowed it back. Last night? Didn't he know everything about last night? The Taoist saw it with his own eyes yesterday. Fu Yu was a bit puzzled by the other person's intentions. Did she blame her for not saying nothing and running for her life? There is a precedent for that exotic beast. If she dares to delay for a moment, she is afraid of dying. This person has already condensed pills, so he shouldn't be so foolish. Besides, he himself is also running for his own life. Fu Yu's expression froze at the thought of this. Yesterday's scene was so chaotic, but this man had time to pay attention to himself and follow behind him. Fu Yu's heart tightened, and she recalled last night's scene in her mind. The reason why she chose to flee immediately was because, by the way. That scream of surprise. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Hidden Piles. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Hidden Piles. Do you want me to remind you? Xianshan saw that Fu Yu had been silent for a long time, and his voice suddenly turned sharp. You may be an undercover agent in the 10-mile market, I just don't know what your purpose is. If you can tell me the truth, I may take you away. Fu Yu was taken aback again. 10-mile market. She lowered her head, but Xianshan didn't notice her expression. Not bad. After careful consideration, Fu Yu dared not tell the other party about the fact that he had already seen the strange beast and the shining light beforehand, not to mention whether the other party would believe it or not. If he did, he was afraid that there would be no good outcome. So we had to continue with the other person's words. I am indeed the hidden pillar of the 10-mile market, so what is your true purpose this time? Xianshan paused for a moment and then said, Don't tell me anything about Xiaotian Wolf. Fu Yu's voice paused, and I wanted to say that too, but would you believe it? No. Fu Yu's mind quickly organized the language, and his voice was somewhat silent. Our group of people only serves as a restraint, and the ultimate goal seems to be a strange treasure. At this point, Fu Yu paused for a moment, but immediately continued, I just don't know what exotic treasure it is. So, there aren't any wolf dens left? Xianshan sneered. Fu Yu heard the man sneer, but her heart was filled with joy. She tried to control her voice and shook her head, saying, I'm not quite sure about that. Xianshan pondered for a moment before frowning and asking, why did you run away yesterday? Although I don't know what the exotic treasure is, I also thought that it wouldn't be a good thing for the people above us to take us to that place. So after the appearance of the exotic beast that day, I decided not to stay any longer. Fu Yu paused and added, actually, I had been waiting for an opportunity to run before, but couldn't find an opportunity. Upon hearing Fu Yu's words, Xianshan believed a little more. Because there was only Fu Yu as the female cultivator in the team, it naturally attracted more attention. Xianshan had noticed Fu Yu's somewhat restless expression before, apparently because he had known some hidden information beforehand, which made his mind uneasy. As for Fu Yu's exclamation, Xianshan didn't take it to heart either. In his imagination, it must have been a coincidence. He could not have imagined that Fu Yu, a small cultivator of qi refining, would have seen a strange beast in advance and let out a scream of surprise. After all, he had not noticed any abnormalities in advance when he was cultivating the elixir. After all, the speed of the strange beast was too fast, and he almost did not avoid it. Thinking of this, Xianshan couldn't help but feel a sense of fear in his heart. Yesterday, the monster was still running away, and the things behind it were probably even more terrifying. Do you also have that map? Xianshan thought of the action of the 10-mile market and felt that some strange treasure might have been born this time. Although this inner circle may seem dangerous at present, those who practice Taoism compete with heaven for their lives, and great danger often means great opportunity. He thought there was something fishy going on and planned to come and take a look, but he didn't expect there to be a treasure. Since he happened to encounter it, there was no reason to return empty-handed due to Fu Yu's inability to pinpoint a specific location. Xianshan was truly curious about the so-called exotic treasure, and in the end, they were unable to find a way back to their original place. Arriving in place, it was not as bloody as Fu Yu had imagined. Because apart from the faint bloodstains they discovered after careful searching, it was completely impossible to see the appearance of dozens of cultivators falling here. Did everyone escape? Fu Yuan pondered to herself. However, she immediately denied this speculation again. It was impossible. The howling of that day seemed to be still ringing in her ears. Although she didn't know what the light she saw was, it was definitely more terrifying than the monster that day. Xianshan also frowned, somewhat puzzled. In this forest full of spiritual beasts, he fully understood that the corpses were missing, but after some investigation, there was not even a trace, even no scraps of clothing, which was not normal. Xianshan was lost in thought and suddenly felt someone approaching in their direction. He pulled Fu Yu over and lightly jumped onto the giant wood above his head. Then, he took out a restrained breath talisman and patted one on himself and one on Fu Yu. Fu Yu was taken aback by Xianshan's actions, but when he saw him making a silent gesture towards him, he didn't ask much and only looked around cautiously. After a few breaths, I saw two cultivators walking towards us, and the cultivator with slightly white temples was undoubtedly Xianfeng Taoist. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Wolf's Nest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Wolf's Nest. Xianfeng Daoyu, didn't you say you've arranged everything? Where are the people? The sound of speaking sounded like a young man, but what Fu Yu saw was an old man with white beard and hair. He also had a slight hunch in his body and was holding a wooden staff in his hand. Don't worry, wooden Taoist. I think they're not far ahead. Xianfeng was also puzzled, but now he could only respond in this way. Xianfeng, aren't you playing tricks on me? When the old man heard the words of Xianfeng Taoist, his face darkened and he said, blood spirit wood is the treasure of our clan. If you refuse to even offer this blood food. Xianfeng listened to the old man's words and his expression became solemn. Muting, you can't say that. The blood spirit wood is naturally raised, so why has it become a possession of your demon tribe? Besides, you and I have discovered this together. Do you want to swallow it alone? Upon hearing this, Mudo's expression froze. Blood spirit wood is naturally a rare treasure for their wooden demon race, but as Xianfeng said, it is a spiritual object of heaven and earth. Talking about this now is not nonsense. Without a lot of essence and blood, the blood spirit wood will not bear fruit until monkey years and horse months. If you can't enjoy it yourself, you can't stop me from accompanying you either. At this point, Taoist Mudo snorted heavily again. In my opinion, the cultivators you're looking for may have already entered the belly of the spirit beast. Xianfeng Taoist's face was ugly, but he really didn't see anyone now, so even if he was choked by Mudo like this, he had to hold back his anger. After all, there is a big difference between blood spirit wood and blood spirit fruit for him. Although blood spirit wood is precious, it is not very practical for the human race, but blood spirit fruit is different. Blood spirit fruit can also supplement the essence and blood of the human race. This is also the reason why he voluntarily proposed to provide human cultivators as blood food to feed the blood spirit wood. For the demon race, the effect of this blood spirit fruit is naturally not comparable to that of blood spirit wood. It is because of this wooden vine old demon that he agreed to delay for a while. If those cultivators have already been buried in the belly of spiritual beasts, then let's put an end to the theory of blood food, just let me not say it. Upon seeing Mudo's skeptical expression, Xianfeng Taoist paused and said, however, this blood spirit wood is of little use to our human race. Since that's the case, as long as Mudo Taoist can provide an equivalent, it's okay for me to exchange my portion with Mudo Taoist. Mudo didn't believe Xianfeng giving up the blood spirit fruit when he heard it, but he also believed Xuanfeng's words a bit. After all, it was the best choice when he couldn't give birth to the blood spirit fruit. Mudo nodded and the two discussed it properly, so there was no further delay. Wooden Vine first offered his wooden staff, and with a light leap, the staff flew forward calmly and close to the ground. Xianfeng saw the Wooden Vine leave first, offered his flying fan, and followed behind. Qin Xian saw that both of them had already left, so he grabbed Fu Yu and jumped down. Even this blood spirit wood can be called a rare treasure. Qin Xian looked at Fu Yu with a smile on his face. Fu Yu's face turned pale as she thought of almost becoming the blood food used by Xianfeng and his companions to feed the blood spirit wood. At this moment, I heard Qin Xian joke that he had never seen the world and didn't care at all. Besides, blood spirit wood may not be a special treasure for the condensing pill period, but it is a big special treasure for her qi refining period. What's so funny about it? Besides, haven't you seen the two Ningdan Taoists go to great lengths over this exotic treasure that you don't like? Qin Xian chuckled lightly when he saw Fu Yu's expression and said, although I don't really like this blood spirit wood, I am interested in it. Fu Yugen had no room for refutation, so he was directly brought up again. In these days, she could basically see that when she said she wanted to search for treasure, she was probably a lively person, but she should also be a person who cherishes her life. Fu Yu could only comfort herself with this. The two of them fell so close and not far behind Xianfeng and Muteng, until they saw Xianfeng and Muteng stopping at a cliff. Xianfeng and Mudo looked at the cave next to the cliff with a somewhat solemn expression. Xianfeng Dao friend, in order not to cause any trouble, we will fight quickly and make a quick decision. Xianfeng nodded, but it was not good if it attracted other spiritual beasts to come over. Seeing Xianfeng, Mudo nodded and without saying a word. He threw his wooden staff in his hand and quickly flipped it in the air, forming a rattan net woven with spiritual power. Go! With a soft drink from Mudo, the vine net went straight towards the cave entrance below the cliff, blocking it tightly. Ahem! Fu Yu was surprised that there really were wolves. In the blink of an eye, the howling wolf who rushed to the entrance of the cave was tightly caught by the vine net. Xianfeng didn't dare to delay, and a fire blade slashed through the vine net, directly passing through the neck of Xiaotian wolf. Xianfeng Dao has a friendly eye. Mudo glanced at the bleeding howling wolf in the rattan net, and a hint of fear flashed in his eyes. Ahem. Ahem. The two of them listened to the constant howls of wolves coming from the cave, and their expressions became even more solemn. Although they were prepared, this time they really poked the wolf's nest. Mudo flipped through the seals in his hand, and each spiritual seal turned into a large net, blocking the entrance layer by layer. Fuyu lay on the ground, listening to the howls of wolves coming from the cave, his palms sweating slightly. He turned his head to look at Qin Xian lying beside him, only to see his eyebrows furrowed. At that moment, the exclamation of Xianfeng Taoist came. Third order howling serious. What? Just sprouted. We need everyone to use recommendation tickets and comments to nurture it. Thank you, **O***, end of this chapter.